24 Rogue is the second book in the 24 Live Another Day book series, not to be confused with the other book series based off of the TV show 24 Declassified. There are three main differences between those two books, chronologically, reputably, and most importantly, formatically speaking. Now I'm going to get to the review of 24 Rogue as soon as humanly possible, but you have to understand that these differences are integral factors that affect the reading experience, especially if you are a fan of the TV show, like me. On the chronological timeline, the show lasted 8 years before it went off the air. A few years later, it came back as a limited time series as 24 Live Another Day. The book series, 24 Declassified, takes place before those first 8 years. 24 Live Another Day book series takes place after those 8 years and before the 24 Live Another Day show. Got it? Good. Great. Moving on. As far as the reputation is concerned, before these book series were even written, published, or whatever, it was pretty much written in stone that they were going to be the superior series over Declassified. Why? Well, there's a few reasons to that. Some are true, some not so much. On one hand, 24 Declassified, published as the mass market paperback, the small books that you see at the bookstore or library. You're walking through a bookstore, you see one on the shelf, maybe it's a library, who knows, you pick one up, you say, oh, hey honey, did you know that they're writing 24 books now? Huh! You're surprised, you're interested, but then again, you just put it back on the shelf. You go about your day. There's way too many TV show books out there that are mass market paperback and are completely forgotten, dust on the shelf, and whatever. 24 Live Another Day is a different story. They are featured on new releases, they are hardback, they have their own audiobooks, and the way that these were advertised was basically that it's going to be a trilogy of books written by 3 different distinguished authors, and it's going to be great. Well, that's not entirely true either, because if you actually went back and researched these authors and found out more about them, you'd realize that they're all basically the same person. Each one of these 3 different authors for 24 Live Another Day have written 30 Star Trek books. I wish I was exaggerating, but they have all written 30 Star Trek novels and little else. The little else that they have written are completely sci-fi related, so let's just hand them the keys to the 24 series, which has nothing to do with science fiction. Makes sense to me. The most important difference between these two series, the one that makes all the difference actually, in my opinion, is the format. You can't just write a book about 24, a TV show that relied so heavily on format as part of the premise without using that format in the books. Now that's not to say they don't. Both series use the format in different ways. But it is my personal opinion that 24 Declassified had a better grasp on the real-time format of the show, as well as you can do in a book. Case in point, take a look at the chapter heading in 24 Declassified. You can tell that the first half of the page is dedicated to the look of 24. You first see the chapter heading. The chapter heading also works as a reminder as to what hour out of the 24 hours you have. It's also made in that 24 clock font that just feels nostalgic. It feels like 24. Next you see the chapter heading that says the following takes place between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. That's also important because that's the same exact words Kiefer Sutherland says over 200 times in the show. Every single episode he has said those words. So when you're reading them, when you're reading this 24 Declassified book, you hear Kiefer Sutherland's voice and it readies you for the rest of the book, the rest of the chapter, whatever. Now, let's take a look at the 24 Live Another Day chapter heading. As you can see here, it's a little different. The chapter heading is just a chapter heading. It's just a number. As far as the time goes, it just says 6 to 7 p.m. Do you hear Kiefer Sutherland's voice when you read that? No. Is it visually appealing? Not really. It's just a chapter heading. Even the font isn't 24, the clock font. It's not. boring. It's boring, and it doesn't make me feel like this is 24 at all. But what about the rest of the format? Throughout the chapters of 24 Declassified, the paragraphs would shift because you're changing scenes, right? There would be a space between paragraphs. Here's how 24 Declassified does it. As you can see here, between the two paragraphs, you have a time, a clock. This happens throughout the chapter as well, something like 3 to 5 times per chapter. It reminds the reader of what time it is. It kind of gives us an idea of how long it took from the last paragraph to this paragraph in real time. It also says by the end of the chapter, the last 10 minutes are the last 10 minutes. You know it takes 10 minutes to finish the chapter. Why is that important? Well, in the actual show, the last 5 to 10 minutes of the show were sometimes the most important. So you're always expecting that while reading the books as well, and that was always true with 24 Declassified. Now, let's take a look at the paragraph spacing in 24 Live Another Day. As you can see, we have 3 asterisks. Something, once again, that you would expect in any other boring book that doesn't have to do with 24. Asterisks that don't help anything. I mean, if you're going to do it, at least tell me what time it is, and they just don't. You'll be lucky throughout the book if a bad guy or a good guy checks out their watch and you're like, oh, there you go. But they just don't do it enough. It's barely ever there. It doesn't focus too much on format on 24, and if you don't focus on the 24 format, how is this a 24 book? But I digress. Let's talk about the actual book. 24 Rogue takes place on sea. At least that's how it begins. Jack Bauer is on a cargo ship that's full of illegal arms dealings, right? They have those cargo shipments, and in each one they have guns, they have whatever, what have you. And Jack's there to take down the mission. But before he can really finish that, or rather in the first chapter, in the first hour, some pirates board the ship, and those pirates are hired by other terrorists that are trying to get a hold of one of the cargo shipments. Turns out one of the cargo shipments have nuclear missiles inside, which Jack was not expecting at all. At this point, I'm a little worried. I don't know anything about ships or boats or the terminology when it comes to them. I have a problem even knowing what a poop deck is, other than hearing other people saying it, and I then laugh. I don't know what a poop deck actually is, what it looks like, and then you get more terminology in there too, like aft poop deck or starboard side or whatever. I have no idea what they're saying. And that's okay, I'm biased and everything, but I can't visualize what I'm reading. Thankfully, that's not the whole book. If it was, I would rather say this was a Die Hard book instead of a 24 Jack Bauer story. It would be more like Die Hard. But thankfully he does get off the ship and the world expands and it becomes more of what you're come to know with 24. You learn that it's not only one terrorist group after the missiles, it's actually 2. Jack comes into partnership with somebody along the way, which helps him while he's actually still in exile from Season 8. So it becomes more like a 24 novel, what you'd expect from the story itself and not so much the format, which is good. Actually, it comes down to a 3-arc system. When the 24 show began, not so much how it ended, but when it began, when it was still in Los Angeles, it followed a 2 to 3 act structure in the midst of this big, gigantic terrorist act. And those were the best seasons because it stuck really closely to those 3 acts and it didn't get too convoluted. That's what this book does. And actually the one before it did the same thing, 24 Deadline, did the same thing. It stuck to 2 to 3 acts, which is good. That is actually better writing than the Declassified series, and that's what I wanted to talk about. The writing is better. It has a better visual idea of what 24 should be on a grander scheme of things. 24 Declassified kind of did the opposite. It just wanted to have a lot of action, a lot of violence, a lot of cursing, and manly stuff. And that's what 24 Declassified was. And it was a lot of fun reading them, but it was cluttered and it wasn't taken seriously while this is, and I do appreciate that. So in that front, 24 Rogue is actually not bad at all. I actually got into it once the ball started rolling. But I do wish it followed the format. I really did, because if it did follow that format, then it would be a very good book. Where's the bomb? I'm gonna shoot you, I'm gonna kill you. 24 Rogue is an okay book, but it is what it is. The only other problem I would have had was the way they explained Jack Bauer, like in the beginning when they had him talking an Irish accent, which doesn't make any sense. Kiefer Sutherland could never do an Irish accent, and you know it. Prove me wrong. I don't know. I rated 24 Rogue 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. You can follow my profile on there. I like to update my reading progress as I go along. My actual reviews I like to review here on YouTube, so you can check those out on Goodreads. You can follow me and subscribe to my channel on YouTube as well, because why not? Alright guys, that's all I have for you today. If you have time, go ahead and subscribe to my channel and leave me a comment if you think there's a book I might enjoy or a book you might want me to review. Put it down in the comments. I'll take a look at it. I'll consider it. And I'll see you next week. And remember, if you're bored, read something.
Poopy-doo.